Okay, everyone, welcome to our practitioner symposium. Today we have Marcy Morrison, who's going to talk to us about her work helping people in high school tap into their purpose. How are you, Marcy?
Thanks, Brandon. And, I just really wanted to start off and just say thanks for bringing us all here together. It's amazing for us to all share and learn from each other. And that's what I decided today. It was just to share my journey because of who am I and how did I get here and why did I choose to really focus on young people. And like I said, Brandon, I know there's people who are going to listen to this recording that have heard this story before, but there are going to be people on here that haven't. So, and Dusty, I know you just heard this, so we're going to go through it again. I always like to start at the beginning because in my work I always talk to people about how so often our purpose is really often found in our pain, our challenges, or when we've been inspired by somebody else. And so mine started on the Jersey Shore, being raised by two parents that are originally from Kansas. And it was one of these interesting things because I do find, like, especially with working with young people, a lot of times there's assumptions made by either your race or your socioeconomic status that maybe your life was easy. And so that's kind of the assumption that was being made when I was growing up. We look like that perfect family, right? Dad was a electrical engineer, very accomplished. He worked for Bell Laboratories, had some early patent development in modem development. So it looked like, oh, wow, dad has this great career. We're upper middle class white family on the Jersey Shore. They've got it made. I always refer to my mom as the high society hippie. She was very active in the community. So, doing a lot of work with Junior League, helping out wherever she could. But she was also really open-minded. She'd be the only white woman that would go to a Native American powwow in the four corners of the United States. And she loved she still does. She loves everyone and every walk of life. And so I'm so grateful to that from her. And so she was an exchange student her last year of high school from Kansas to Germany. And so we also grew up with that program that she went with, which was AFS. I don't know if you guys know about AFS, but it's American Field Service. And it was started in World War I and II by the ambulance drivers that were French and American. And they said to each other, let's make sure this never happens again. And the way that we can create peace, love, understanding, and compassion in this world is to provide cross-cultural exchanges. And so my mom actually worked for AFS in New York and would go into the city with me pregnant in her belly and always said, you're going to be my AFS baby. And so we grew up around that with other cultures, and I resisted it. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to do that. So there were so many gifts going on, but behind all that was this world that people didn't see with two parents that were both alcoholics. And so it was that generation too. Like, you didn't talk about like what was going on. You pretended that everything was okay. And there's just a lot of instability, a lot of lack of support, a lot of emotional abuse with my father, basically saying that, you're the only way to be worthy is to be an engineer. Everybody else is worthless, right? And so as not being an engineer, that was really hard on me because I didn't see my own value. I didn't love who I was. And so to me, that's at the deepest core of why I do what I do, especially helping young people, because I know what that feels like to not really love yourself, really not believe in yourself, not really value yourself. And so fortunately, my mom, she got sober when I was 13, and that really began this great recovery process for us where, we went into Alateen, Al-Anon, got counseling. And to me, that was really the journey of me learning to love who I am, to value who I am, to learn in a power greater than myself, to learn spirituality, learn new tools. But honestly, it's still going on. So that falling in love with me piece is my second book, as you all know, from a deep personal place, and then just really wanting to support people on that leg of the journey. And so Senior year came and I got the bug and I said, you know what, Mom, I'm going to be your AFS baby now. And so I applied to be an exchange student, and I left in the middle of my senior year and lived in Australia for a year. And it was just it was an amazing experience in so many ways, because I lived with an amazing family that was very functioning, very supportive, very loving, and that was really cool to experience. I have one brother here. I had three host sisters in Australia, so I got to have a whole experience of living with other teenage girls, which is always interesting. And I don't know, it just really helped expand my world so much. Came back to the United States, was on this mission. I always wanted to be a veterinarian. I just absolutely love animals. And so that's what I did. I went to school with that path in mind. And so again, when I'm working with people, young people, adults, everything, I always say it's so important, right, to put all the pieces together. What it is you love to do, why do you feel like you're here, and also what are you good at? And so that was the question that I forgot to ask myself when I went to be going to veterinarian, because I realized, like, why it didn't occur to me before, but all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I hate these science classes and I suck at science, right? And so I'm like, this is going to be a problem to be a veterinarian. And it was like this really identity crisis for me. And I ended up dropping out of college. And, the engineer father was like, this is the end of the world. You're going to be a loser. Like, what are you going to do? Right. And I used that opportunity to do what I do with everybody that I work with as well. And I asked myself, when am I happiest? What is it that I really enjoy doing the most? And what I realized is how much I really love that experience in Australia. I love being there with 250 other exchange students from all over the world, and many of them I'm still friends with today, and admire that they learned English as a second language and I learned an accent. Like, I was like, we got to step this up. And so I said, you know what, that's what I want to do. I want to do something international and learn another language. So I went and studied international affairs in Spanish and studied in Spain, took all my classes in Spanish, lived with a Spanish madre that didn't speak any English. So I had no choice but to learn Spanish. And I just love to share all these stories, because whenever I talk to young people too, they think that they have to have it all figured out. And what I tell them is that it's always about putting all the pieces of your passion puzzle together and of your experience, right? And I always say what I do is, as a career life weaver, because for me, it's always like weaving in all these different pieces. And so it seems less overwhelming to them, right? Because when you're 17 and you're like, if I look back in hindsight, sure, it all makes sense. But when I'm dropping out of college and doing all these things are not making sense, right? So it's a process. So when I graduated, it was like 91. It was a recession, and people told me you're going to be lucky enough to find any job, let alone your dream job. And I just chose not to listen to that. So in Finding Your Passion, the easy guide to your dream career, my first book, I talk about the steps. First one is believe in yourself, trust your gut, know what you love, and how important it is to have a support team. And so I didn't know I was living my own steps at the time, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to make a choice not to listen to that, because I believe in so much of finding my dream job that I'm going to go do it. And I know the only way to do that is to network, get the support I need, and talk to as many people as I know. And I set out on that mission to use my Spanish and my skills to make a difference in the world. It wasn't clearly defined, but at least I had that down. So I was talking to like international education, international development, all those kind of areas. And finally, one of my friends from undergrad, she had worked at this really cool place called the Inter-American Foundation, that was before microfinance even was a word. It was more called grassroots development then. And we gave small grants to projects to help people get out of poverty all over Latin America. And I got assigned to El Salvador, and which was really cool, because that was like just after their 10-year civil war, that whole Sandinista era. The country was totally wiped out. So anything that we did, like, you could just see the impact. And what was so cool to me in that situation was this realization that I had just as much to receive from them as they had to receive from me. And I realized in some ways these people had it better figured out than the first world, right? They may not have a lot materialistically, but they had gratitude, community, support, love. And I'm just like, wow, I feel so blessed to have this opportunity to help and then to also learn from them. So one project that I worked on was a woman-run radio station, which was really cool because before the Civil War in El Salvador, it actually said in the Constitution that women could not receive loans or grants. But since 50% of the men were killed in the Civil War, they had no choice but to let women receive money. So that was like a really like revolutionary thing at the time. And so these women asked me, they go, "Could you help us with a business plan?" I'm like, "What? I don't, what's the business plan?" And then all of a sudden in that moment, this light bulb went off. Oh my God, I could actually save the world better if I had business skills, right? And I love to share that with kids too, because it's kind of like there's always opportunities to add to our skill set too, right? How can we even contribute more by having more talent? So that's the next quest. Is I said, okay, well, where do I get a master's degree in business? Somebody I worked with in DC went to UC San Diego, and he said, that's a great program, you should check it out. And so I came out here 22 years ago in San Diego to get my master's in international business with a focus on Latin America. And at that time, right, like remember like the days when it was like you either went to a company and you made a lot of money, or you lived in poverty to help people in poverty, right? Those were the options, right? And so I at that time decided that if I really need to learn business skills, I actually need to work in business. That's what I thought. That was what I told myself. And so I ended up going up to San Francisco near you, Brandon, and did an internship with Bank of America, Latin America Corporate Finance, and then did an internship at Qualcomm, which led to a job in international marketing. And what I realized through that experience is it was so soul sucking for me because there was no purpose. Like I felt like I was going to work every day so we could sell these products and make money. And while I went there to learn, I also realized that I just can't work in that environment. So I always, when I'm working with young people or anybody, I always say, you got to be really honest with yourself, like how important that environment really is to you and the mission being in alignment with what you're doing. So the universe sent me a great gift. Ericsson bought our division and 2,500 of us lost our jobs, and an outplacement firm came in, and that was like such a gift because I remember, I don't remember everything that happened, but I do remember there was like, what is your top 5 list that you want in your next opportunity? And honestly, I don't remember all 5, but it was like, I want to work 100% with Latin America. I want to be able to travel there. I need to be with people. And like, that was kind of the gist of it. And so I set out on my quest, just like I did in DC, and I talked to as many people as I could and went out there. And ironically, I went next door to where I went to grad school at this place called the Institute of the Americas, where I'd also interned during grad school. And they organized conferences all over Latin America. So I figured, well, this is a great resource for me because if I want to work in Latin America, that's what they know people that do that. So I told them my whole thing, and they're like, well, we have a job for you here. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know I was going to work here. And it was a nonprofit. And I go, well, you guys can't even pay me what I got paid before. And they're like, what'd you make? And I'm like, okay, we'll pay you that. So it was like to have those conversations with young people too. Don't assume, go after what you want and then get into the conversation because you just never know what's possible, right? And so it was a great job. I traveled to Latin America 5 times a year, all different parts, from Mexico to Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil. It was amazing. And then I had my first child. Cameron is now 16, and my second child, Logan, is now 13. And so I always talk about these opportunities to hit the pause button. I was really fortunate to stay home with them for 3.5 years. And then the universe sent me another gift, right? I always talk about how these things come too, right? Like you just can't predict how these pieces come in. I didn't know you were going to come in, Brandon, and create this purpose leaders group. Um, so my friend became a life coach during that time that I was home with my kids. And she's like, oh, can I practice on you? And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, I'm helping her. She's not helping me. That's kind of was my mindset. And so she had me do this really powerful experience. She said, we're going to go into meditation. You're going to win an award 10 years from now. And this was like 2007 or 2006, somewhere around there, 2006. And I want you to walk on that stage and tell me what you see when you receive that award. And I said, okay. So all of a sudden I see somebody hand me a box, and the box opens, and then this like fairy, or like almost like Tinkerbell award, actually flies out of the box. Like, it's like, wow, that's pretty futuristic. She goes, what do you see? I said, I see this child with wings. And she said, what does that mean? And I said, it means that my purpose here is to help children get out of poverty. And she goes, oh, really? How are you going to do that? I go, I don't know, but that's what I feel. And so that's been the quest since then, over 10 years ago. And it was separate, right? I shared that just like I shared my dreams with everyone else. I go, oh, I found out my purpose is this, and ended up helping a friend with a nonprofit in Uganda, and like doing like volunteer work around more children in poverty, right? And then like a year later, I started going, okay, well, now I got to contribute to my household. How do I bring in income? And I asked myself, what's the difference that I want to make in this world? And I always would watch people go to work every day like it was a prison sentence. And I go, why? Like, I understand maybe the short term we have to pay bills, but isn't there something more? Like, how do I help people do what they really love and live their purpose, and then tie that to making a difference in the world? And so Careers with Wings was born in 2007. And so, yeah, so those two things were totally separate. And again, all these unexpected things, like I never in a million years expected to write a book. That came because the first year I started my business, people kept telling me, I hate all the career books that are out there. I actually feel more overwhelmed than when I started, like, what color is your parachute? I'd rather stick needles in my eyes because that thing is so painful, right? And I said, well, what do you really want? And they said, an easy to use workbook that helps me understand me. And I'm like, oh my God, I already have that. Like, because what happened was I started to notice these patterns of asking all the same questions I asked myself, and then started asking other people. And so I would actually send it to people in advance of our meeting, similar, like a longer version of what I shared with all of you guys on the Facebook page. And I had worked with an inspirational speaker. I knew his literary agent. I knew how to get a book published. So I called his agent. I said, listen, everyone's telling me that they're frustrated with these books. What do you think of this idea? And he goes, great. I think it's great. Let's put together a book proposal and shop it around. So that's what we did. And then it got picked up. And then I'm like, oh gosh, now I need to go make money while I write this book. And somebody suggested, oh, you should do outplacement. You'd be really good at that. Like, you'd be great at assisting layoffs and helping people in transition. So that was the summer of 2008. I went there to write management, and they're like, we're not that busy. I'm like, but I speak Spanish too. And they're like, no, we'll call you if we need you. And then a month later, the whole entire world blew up. And then there was like, I was on the front lines of the economic downturn from 2008 to 2010. And I didn't plan to be there. I didn't know that was going to happen, but I kind of felt like that was where the universe called me to be. And it was really a beautiful opportunity to hold people's hand through this difficult time, and then really help them find themselves and figure out why they're here and go live their passion and purpose. So I just keep surrendering, still like, okay, well, what is the next level of this passion and purpose? So meanwhile, and all of that happening, in 2008, for my 40th birthday, I went to Peru, and I made a commitment that whenever I travel, I'm always going to give back to children. And so I go to our hotel in Cusco, and I say, do you know somewhere that I can help children? They say, go to this orphanage on the other side of town. And so it was my ex-husband now, but we went over to the orphanage, and I said, well, where are the babies? I just assumed orphanage meant babies. And they said, well, there are no babies here. This is actually a facility for kids 15 to 25 who have lost their parents to either drugs, alcohol, or jail. And we provide a home environment and career training. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, it was almost like I could see it visually, like children with wings, careers with wings. And it was like the dots connected. And I go, that's it. That's how I'm going to help these kids get their wings, is I'm going to help them with their path. And I was like, oh my God. So I came back to the United States and I'm like, how am I going to do that? So I ended up in this meeting for at-risk youth. We all went around the table, and sitting next to me, this man staring at me like, oh my gosh, he's the executive director of Just in Time for Foster Youth here in San Diego. And he said, I've been looking for someone like you. We just got a grant to help build a program called the Career Horizons for Young Women. And I've made a decision that I don't want it just to be about your resume. I want it to be about, who are you? What do you love about yourself? What is your passion? What is your purpose? And he goes, will you join us in helping us create this program? And I'm like, yes. And so I've been involved with Just in Time ever since then. Oh my God, how long is that? Is it 10 years? No, like seven years. And I just felt like that was exactly where I needed to be too. And so, yeah, so it's been this interesting balance of the adults and the kids. And then, as you know, Brandon and Dusty, that I'm really involved with the Community Alliance for Youth Success that I joined 3 years ago in the steering group. And we've done 2 youth success weeks here in San Diego to really help support kids to live their best life. And so it's been really an honor to help these young people with a team of really amazing people dedicated to helping support young people. And I got to thank Brandon too, because the truth is like earlier this year, I was still going down both paths of helping adults and kids. And then Brandon had us fill out that spreadsheet that said, what's your avatar? And I go, I have 2. What am I supposed to do? And Brandon said, pick one. And I'm like, oh crap. And then I realized that was the greatest. I didn't fully settle in just then, but that was the catalyst that really helped me ask myself again, where is the impact that I really want to make? And there's no doubt in my mind that it is with young people. And so right now I'm in discussions with Oceanside Unified School District, with the superintendent, to really go deep into helping especially the at-risk youth in Oceanside. Over 50% of the people there live in poverty. And this school in particular, most of the families are Hispanic, which is so interesting because I always say you just never underestimate how you can put all together the pieces of your passion puzzle. Because when I met with the superintendent, I said, you know what, Dwayne, I'm not attached to being a coach or doing anything. I just want to help you fulfill your mission of the Oceanside Promise to make sure that every kid is college and career ready. And I go, what do you need? And he goes, what you got? And so we like laid out all of my passions, all of my skills, which include career coaching, Spanish, marketing, sales, fundraising. And so he goes, I'll take it all. So really this role is a dual role of looking at building these career programs to support at-risk youth, which I could see eventually could spill out into other areas. And then the other part is to actually help him with the corporate fundraising piece of his Oceanside Promise, which I did before kids, which I actually love doing that, especially for the right purpose. So nothing's 100% solid yet, but what I've known from this experience and what I share with everyone is when you hold that intention, you can't even imagine like what's going to happen, right? Like I even wrote down the intention, Brandon, before you started this, is I don't want to do this alone anymore. I really want to connect with like-minded people where we can really collaborate. And then here comes Brandon that makes this all possible. So I really, when I'm working with young people and anybody, I just say, write that dream out as clearly as you can. And, it will be continued to be fine-tuned. And so, yeah, it's been this amazing journey too of like, okay, well, if I really want to help people, how can I best do that, right? And so my own life experience also led me to a divorce, which sent me deep into this like process of learning to really love myself. And so that second book too got me to even peel away that. I love that Dusty is like this mask. What do you call take off the mask? Oh, he's on mute.
Mask lifter.
Mask lifter. I love that because I feel like that's what I did for myself because I actually hired my own life coach at that time that I wrote that book. And he goes, you know what, Marcy, I feel like there's this really juicy part of you that you're not sharing with the world. And that part of me was Tinker Angel, that character. That's me as a representation of a character to write that book because in that alcoholic home with that engineer father, this playful fairy spirit of myself wasn't safe to come out. But I realized that by me being fully myself is the greatest gift I can give to people. And so much of my work now has actually shifted into how do we play more? How do we have more fun? How do we become these characters that are representations of ourselves? So that book to me has been really fun. And I know Brandon's actually going to go speak at Illumina. So it's been really cool to test out being a fairy in places like a human genomic biotech place, right? So, and kids love it because that's all they want to do is just be themselves too. So it was scary, but I decided to bring Tinker Angel out of the closet. And that book it's funny too, because that book is so tiny. And so I had a lot of judgment too, like this book should be like 150 pages, but more people have gotten more people have gotten more out of that book than the first one because it is so short, but it is so powerful and has you really go deep into who you are and lift your mask off and celebrate and love who you are. So anyway, so that's the story, my own life career weaving journey, passion plus purpose equals world change journey. So I'd love to hear from, I know we have you guys on the phone, and I wanted to hear too if you had a chance to look at either one of those things or anything that you've experienced, but anything that I've shared. So I open it up to whoever wants to share.
I can share.
Hi Brandon.
um, First of all, Marcy, let me just say that one of the most powerful expressions of purpose and soul is story, is myth, is narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And like I could listen to you talk about your life, like that same story over and over and over again.
Thanks, Brandon.
Um, Michael Mead and Thomas More, they talk about how like these stories about our lives need to be shared over and over and over again because
Mm-hmm.
we learn about ourselves. And anyways, it's a way to kind of weave it together, bring it all together, to pull that golden thread, that upavita, to the next thing. Anyways, I just really loved how you share your story. And
Oh, thank you, Brandon.
yeah, like that there's an uncommon level of faith that I think you have in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and an uncommon ability to express that. And that is a beautiful gift to anybody who gets to hear your story, because we all want that. We all want to just be like, here's me. Here's what happened. And, I learned some things and had some careers and had this, and like, here's what I learned. Here's what I learned. Um, yeah. So there's a couple things I wanted to ask you about from a practitioner perspective, and yeah, and I'll just share like another just couple quick kind of biographical reflection points.
Sure.
I think especially in progressive postmodern circles, to talk about a life of middle class upbringing, people are like, who cares? Whatever. Like, you comfortable white people. You have nothing real to offer the world, and
Totally.
yeah, and it's not true. It's absolutely not true.
Mm-mm.
And to everyone's story means something to somebody else. And yeah, hearing you share yours gave me less kind of self-doubt about mine. That like, it's okay. It's okay that, I grew up playing golf. That's okay. It's like, it doesn't make me a bad person, um, or not interesting. And so I guess what I want to talk with you about is like, out of all the work that you've done with kids coming into their identities, into their lives, into their careers, what would you say are the things that kids most need out of this work? Like, what do they really want? Do they want like career clarity? Is it self-love? Like, what is it that at this stage in their life that they're really aching for in this work?
Mm. I think it's really the permission to be who they are and love that and know that they matter and that their path matters. Like a couple of weeks ago, it was so awesome for me because I've been working with the women for Just in Time for Foster Youth for the last, whatever, I get lost track now, 8 years something. And they have Bridges for Success for young men. And I've been kind of watching it from afar, and I thought only men were allowed there. And I said, do you ever bring women in to like lead workshops? He's like, yeah, you come. And so it was just really interesting to hear these young men. Like one guy there shared that he wants to make a difference in healthcare. And so when I asked him why, it was because growing up in poverty, he spent so much time like waiting in line in the clinics and just being so frustrated that he really wants to make access for anybody to be easy to healthcare. And it was almost like he kind of shared that dream to himself. And it just like the reaction of all of us about like, you're freaking awesome and we believe in you and this is going to happen. Like you could see how good he felt about himself and how much even more determined he is to go. And Just in Time is all about providing mentorship and support for people. So I feel like more than anything, young people need to be able to share their dream and to be supported on the journey. And because so many of us, right, we just kind of like struggled along, and whether we're white and playing golf or we're former foster youth, so many of us try to figure it out on our own. And if you have support, it's just so much easier.
Yeah. Have you read any Michael Meade?
No.
You would love him. I mean, he's a guy from the streets of New York who does a lot of work with at-risk youth.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I'm just reminded of, as you're sharing about this young man sharing his passion for healthcare and why. Um, this passage from Michael Meade struck me. He said something to the effect of, a society is playing with fire when it rejects the innate nobility of its youth.
Mm.
Because it says something like the injustices of the soul get lived out on the streets as a kind of poetic justice or something like that.
Wow.
I mean, I just, yeah, it's so moving. Such like a blue collar soul guy, and I just love it about it. I love that way of expression about him. But there's, in he shared something else about that anybody who would deny our youth the ability to live their soul has lost their own. Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's pretty powerful. I'm going to read it. I just got
oh,
chills.
oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I get chills every time I read him. I mean, it's just amazing.
I got to meet him.
Yeah, you got to meet him. Yeah.
He sounds cool. I'm going to reach out.
Yeah. I can see like you, Will Damon, Susan Lucci, Michael Mead forming some kind of youth soul council. And I'm sure
I
Dusty's
That's
got
cool.
thoughts on that too. But anyways, those are
That's
my
really cool.
initial reflections and um, yeah. And thank you for sharing about what it was that these young people most need.
Thanks, Brandon. And by the way, Susan, I set up a call with Stem and Graham, Susan Lucci, and I on Monday to talk about what Susan can do in Chicago.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Phenomenal. That's great.
Cool.
Well, thank
Hi.
you. Thank you, Marcy.
Thanks,
I love
Dustin.
hearing your story again. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. And we can see each other now because before we
Yeah.
weren't on video. This is more fun.
Right. That sounds like just rich and juicy, wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank
And
you.
the youth are so ripe for this work. And I'm just grateful that there's someone like you out there guiding them, because there's a lot of people out there guiding them that are misguiding them. I think that's a lot of the trouble that we have. So it's a blessing that there's soul initiated adults guiding our youth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. And it's funny because I'm only 5 feet tall and 3/4 of an inch. So like some I went to I was a chaperone for my son's middle school like end of year picnic thing, and I had sunglasses on so they didn't see my like wrinkles and stuff, and I even got a popsicle because they thought that I was a kid. So I think it's good that I'm short and that my spirit is very childlike, because it's like I don't feel like they look at me like some militant, like imposing adult, because I just really do feel at home with them. It's, and I don't ever look at myself as better than them or anything like that. Like I share my journey just like I did with all of you when I speak to them. And at first I was really uncomfortable with that because it was stuff that I hid behind those upper middle class white doors for so long that um, it was a little scary to come out with that, because I had been so good at pretending that I was happy and perfect all the time. And so but what happened when I first started working, especially with foster youth, is I realized that they couldn't connect with me because they couldn't see how much we were the same. And so I thank them for giving me the courage to fully show up. And I just said, you know what? It's just, this didn't come from a book. Like you said, Dusty, this is like soul initiation. This is like real, like in the trenches, blood, sweat, and tears, like living it. So, and I know that they feel that from all of us, that we've all had our own journey.
Yeah. As I was listening to you tell your story, when you got to the point where you were working with youth, and even with Brandon's question of what the youth need or want most, and your response, and it just so resonant that that's not just with the youth. It's like what most people in our culture really need and want. And our chronological age has very little to do with it. So, but how delightful it is that you're in the trenches with the youth at a time in their life in development where they need it the most, where they can. You've probably saved a lot of youth a lot of trouble.
I hope so. Yeah, for sure. But I get it totally about adults. It's like the more I try to move into youth, and the more adults keep showing up. It's really, really interesting. So I hear you,
Yeah.
Dusty. And, honestly, like most of the people that come to me are in their 40s and definitely in like what, if you want to call it a midlife crisis or whatever. And I would say 95% of the time, what's happening is some deep childhood issue that they pushed down ever since that era in their lives. And so it's like, it's got to come up and heal at some point, right?
Yeah, and not only, healing to me is just the beginning,
Yeah,
right? Because there's a gift in there somewhere
for
Yeah.
for
if
sure.
if they're willing to and able to get close to it and get to know it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, like one of the first things I have adults do when I meet with them is remember how to play again. And so it's just amazing, like what happens through that. Like one client really found his passion and purpose by just being with his son on the playground and just releasing
Yeah.
all that and learning how to play again. It was really,
Yeah.
really cool. He connected so deeply to himself and his child.
Right. Yeah. It's great.
I'd love to like figure out more of the mask lifter too. So maybe Dusty can at some point really describe, because you didn't really go into that process, right? Of the mask lift. Is that what it's called? Mask
Yeah.
lifter?
Mask lifter. Mask lifter is a metaphor for removing a veil that hides the soul. So, that name actually came to me on a day walk in the Clarks Fork Canyon once years ago, a decade or more ago anyway. And it was, well, should I spend a couple minutes and tell you this story? You want to hear this story?
I'm open to it. Are you open to it, Brandon?
Sure.
Okay,
I am.
so I'm walking in this canyon, and this canyon's quite a place. It's very powerful. It's where the Clarks Fork River comes barreling out of the Beartooth Mountains, and the elevation drop in just a few short miles is somewhere around 4,000 feet. And once it hits the bottom, then the canyon goes on for about 5 miles. But so it's a very powerful place. And I'm walking on a trail, and I stumble across this bone in the trail. I step on it, and I just pick it up, and I'm looking at it, and I didn't really know what to think of it. So I just held on to it, and I finished walking out of the canyon. And as I got out of the canyon, I held it up, and what it was a vertebrae of an elk. And it was interesting because when you held it up, there was 2 holes in it, and then that looked like eyes, and then another hole that looked like a mouth. And anyway, so it brought on the characteristics of a face. And this bone was deformed somehow. I don't know if it was a genetic thing or if it had been damaged at some point and grew weird, but it wasn't uniform. And so the face that it formed had a lot of character. And when I looked at it and recognized a face, is what happened is, it just spoke to me, mask lifter, and that's what I do. And so then, courting that over a period of time and reflecting on how I am with people, it spoke a lot to my innate gift of looking under the veil, and not only looking under the veil, but raising it so someone else can see themselves. And that was the most important part. And so I courted that for some time. The rest of that story is, though, as I started courting the face on that, it looked like a face of madness. I mean, really, when I would look at it, that's the feeling I would get, is this face of madness. And I knew what, it deep inside me, I knew what that meant, that I was looking at my own face of madness. And I come home and I showed it to my family. my daughter was probably 13 or 14 at the time. And when I held it up and said, "Do you see this? It looks like the face of madness." And she grabbed it and turned it around and she says, "Look, Dad, there's a face on the other side too."
Wow.
And it was like stunning when I looked at that, because the face on the other side was a face of fear. And so I ended up taking that bone on a vision fast. And we had a fire ceremony that we were going to burn some objects in, something, that we wanted to transform. And I don't know if you've ever tried to burn bone, but it doesn't work.
Wow.
It doesn't burn. Okay. And so the point is that because I couldn't burn, I wanted the face of fear and madness to go away, right? I wanted it to transform into something else on this vision fast, and it wouldn't. And so that right there is what showed me more than anything over years of courting that face of madness, courting that face of fear. What is that? What does that mean? And understanding my own ability to get other people to lift their own mask and see their own face. And the face of madness comes into that, because that's why we carry the mask. That's why we put them on, is because of the madness in the world.
Mm.
And the reason we don't take them off is because of the fear. And so to help people, to guide people through that process of first peering into their own identity, and then guiding them through the process of starting to court that identity and get to know it and cultivate it, and face the fear of it. Because I don't know anybody that I've ever worked with that when we get into real soul and initiation type work, it's frightening. It can be, destabilizing. Walk away from our whole life. So that's part of the story of Mask Lifter. That's where that came from.
That is so powerful. Wow.
Thank you, Dusty.
And there's much more that goes with it. That's just the beginning of images and metaphors that help inform me of my deepest level, my deepest purpose.
I think you need to do another call on that and then talk about the pollinator as well.
Yeah.
What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah.
That's cool. I love, talk about stories. I could listen to that all day too. He's like, I kind of go into like a little bit of like a trance when he's
I know.
talking. It's so great. He's so peaceful. That peaceful Montana, like I'm in Clark's Canyon with you. Like I'm just like transported there.
Right.
Let's go do our vision quest out there, Brandon, with him, with Dusty out there.
Yeah. I think that's I've been feeling that since 2016, that there would be some kind of group quest that is going to be happening somehow, sometime. Because I think I just feel like as we're coming together as a movement, as the force for soul, there's going to be some deeper initiations that we're all going to have to step into.
I just went through one because I'm a Leo. My birthday is August 18th, and that Leo eclipse ripped some deep mask off. That was intense.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things I wanted to comment on your story, Marcy, that I think is pertinent in this conversation is especially when we're talking about working with adults. I mean like chronological adults, right?
Uh-huh.
Somebody in their 40s or 50s or what have you. And the idea that our conversation with purpose can be had in whatever it is we're doing. So, and the reason I guess is what I'm trying to say is that I know there's people that are adults that are in careers that they don't want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like them, right? And so it might be helpful that they change careers, but because they're in their 40s and they have families and kids and obligations, and it becomes really difficult for a lot of people, and it doesn't have to stop them from starting to live into their own mythopoetic conversation.
Mm.
Totally.
Because the conversation, the soul purpose, the soul conversation can be had regardless of what we're doing or where we're doing it. Now there's certain places that are more congruent, and we get to choose, what we want to help perpetuate in the world. And so
Mm-hmm.
those things are choices to me of vocation or occupation, what do we want to do to earn a living. And I find that with working with not older people, but middle-aged people, that this idea of, economics can really stop them in their tracks from taking the deeper dive. Because they're like, gosh, everybody I've talked to has told me that in order to really go on that deep dive, I'm going to end up losing my job, losing my wife, losing my family, losing my house.
Totally. It can be
And
scary.
right, and that's scary stuff. And none of that has to happen, but maybe it does.
Right. If that's the
Right?
path, right? Maybe it's time to shed
Right,
everything.
maybe it does, but it's not, that's not something that you have to put on the altar when you begin.
Mm.
Exactly. Because I've had a lot of people do some major transitions, and it's for the best. It actually improves everything around them, including their marriage, and just getting
Right.
clarity too. Maybe they don't even want that big house anymore. I had like one doing all the layoffs and everything. I know we don't have a lot of time, but long story short, I ended up working with this guy. He was about 45, originally from China, actually developed software for GPS phones. And he kind of went through this whole thing that you're just talking about right there. And then as we got really deep into like what is most important to him was his family and his community. And he actually didn't want to have all this material thing, and he didn't want to be working 70 hours a week. And so it was like this really beautiful experience of him taking his technical skills and actually working for a credit union one block away from his daughter's daycare, and through the credit union being able to make a difference in the community. So it's so cool, like, to go, okay, what is it you really want? Now, how do we like create that so we can create the life that you really want,
Yeah.
right?
So one of the questions I like is instead of what it is you really want, it's how do you really want to be?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How do you really want to be? Because that speaks to me more of the mythopoetic identity. Because
Mm,
I can be a pollinator wherever I go. All I have to do is drink the beauty, the essence of the other being, and I pollinate. So I can do that. I can do that anywhere. I can do
uh-huh.
it at the grocery store. I could do it at the bank,
That's true.
whatever, right? And so that's the kind of that's the kind of identity and purpose I like to help people fish out of themselves. Is what's that mythopoetic purpose? So how do you, it's like I work with some coaches, and coaches, most of the coaches I know, they're really in that occupation because they really want to serve people. They really want to help people. And so when we get started and I start asking what their purpose is, that's what they start to say as well, you know, and they might have a life story and say, well, this is my purpose because I want to help, you know, men with their marriage, maybe. I'm not sure whatever it could be. And so I'll ask them, well, are there other coaches out there doing that? And the answer is usually yes, there is. So I want you to tell me how it is that you help men with their marriages that's completely unique. And that usually starts luring them into the conversation of, wow, there is something deeper than that wants to come forth. And then we'll use this, you know, then is what I do is I use practices like dream work, shadow work, mirroring, that kind of thing to start fishing those things out.
That sounds awesome, Dustin. Do you do any work with kids at all or no?
No, I have not worked with youth, and I love that we're in conversation because for years it's like I've got shadow around the youth.
Wow.
There's things I don't know about myself that have really stopped me from it, because I know that because when it's like somebody says, well, why don't you work with youth? I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do that. I don't need to do that. And I'm not really sure where that comes from.
Wow. Because I feel so much like what you're sharing, like even especially kids that have dealt with trauma, like former foster youth, because there's so much beauty underneath all their pain and shields and everything. Like, gosh, you could help those kids so much. I get
about Dusty's edge.
I know Dusty's like, is it getting teary over there? I don't know.
No, I get it, and I know it's on the horizon. I mean, just listening to you today, I'm thinking, gosh, you know, here I am again.
There are no accidents at
right,
all.
here I am again. Yeah.
There's a guy in our community who hasn't been super vocal, but his name's Praveen Mantena, and he's done work with School Lost Borders. He's also PGI guide, but he's done a lot of rites of passage work with young men.
Oh, wow.
13 to 18, quest-oriented passage work for young men. And if you haven't connected with him, you should talk with Praveen about what he's done with young men.
I would really love that. The young men keep coming up more and more. Like I told you that this work recently with those young men and the former foster youth, and I don't think there's any accident that I was given to boys myself. I feel that, and it was interesting because when I first started my business, I was targeting stay-at-home moms going back to work. And so my website was super cute. I had hummingbirds and butterflies, and it was about as girly as you could get. And who comes to me?
Men.
Middle-aged men, because I feel like we are perfect to work together, right? With this loving, nurturing, feminine energy. They're attracted to that. And these young men, like so many of them have not really received that love, you know. I mean, a lot of us, like you said, Dusty, it doesn't matter our chronological age. It's just so yeah, I feel called a lot to support men in general. And I know, Brandon, like you're the opposite, right? Because you feel called to support women. So we're all supporting who we need to support.
Well, similar to what Dusty shared, like I also want to support men, and who comes to me are like high-powered female executives in their 50s. And, you know, that's what's coming to me, and I'm great with them. And I'm like, God, I want to work with like Justin Trudeau and Barack Obama, and like I want to work with those kind of men. And there's something that needs to shift for me. There's something that needs some shadow that needs to be lifted there. But hey, listen, we need to wrap up. And I just want to say, Marcy, thank you for the work that you do and for sharing yourself so openly. I think we can all, as kind of purpose, soul, underworld practitioners, learn something from how you express yourself.
Oh, thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, way.
Yeah, seriously, it's uncommon for to have that kind of depth and extroversion mastery that you have to express yourself and also be like really committed and deep.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, it's something I had resisted, but I realized that that's part of how I can best serve people is through that. So, been doing it for a while now. So I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and we'll see y'all next week for Susan Lucci, and that will actually bring a close to this practitioner symposium, as first thing, and then we'll see what's there in the space, and maybe next year, early next year, we'll launch something, another set of talks or another set of experiences. But we'll see what happens. But come join us next week, Friday.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Brandon. Thanks,
Marcy.
Tessie.
See ya.
Bye. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.